When Seek participated in the Hunter Academy tournament, he left one of the strongest hunters in the world stunned. From the moment the fights began, everyone sensed that something was off. One by one, the students charged at him, trying to use the techniques they had perfected, but they found that their blows only met their own bare hands. There were no flashy skills or special weapons, only perfect timing and overwhelming strength. Even the guild officers and explorers observing from above couldn't believe what they were seeing. When Seek reached the final and defeated the Academy's top student, the entire arena erupted into chaos. Just when it seemed the tournament was over, the same Lee Kyun stepped onto the stage. A world-class hunter, a monster compared to ordinary students. Unlike the others, she immediately understood that Seek was hiding something far more dangerous than mere brute force. The confrontation demanded a much greater effort from Seek than any previous. His body began to slow down, his breathing grew heavy, and fatigue started to take over. At that moment, Suk finally revealed his terrifying power, which had been concealed until then. He ignited his black flame, not to burn his opponent, but to destroy the very notion of exhaustion. In an instant, his exhausted body came back to life. His speed was restored, his power grew once more, and for the first time, even Lun was forced to acknowledge that the warrior standing before her was no ordinary novice. The question is, how did this man manage to become so strong? The story begins with our protagonist, Hyun, narrating how he arrived in a different world, one he himself asked to save. After 20 years in that new world, he finds himself facing the monster boss alongside 3 companions: a saint, a mage, and a knight. The monster praised Sayok, telling him he had given a truly good fight for someone considered a hero. Sayok responded jokingly, assuring that he too was not in his best condition. But the monster couldn't handle the joke, and it infuriated him greatly. Then he lunged at Sayok with a powerful thrust. However, Sayok blocked the attack with his lance, causing a deafening clash. Meanwhile, the mage tried to support from behind, and the monster threatened to crush Juke if he refused to submit. The monster boasted that this land was a kingdom created with his teeth and claws. They continued exchanging devastating blows. After a few minutes, Seek grew tired of the fight and decided to end the battle. He powered up his lance with a skill called the Flame of Paradox and launched his attack against the monster. This caused a massive explosion that sent the enemy flying away, smashing rocks in the process. The battle intensified, exchanging blows of maximum power, leaving everyone around as if they were small children. Sayok managed to wound the monster, but it mocked him, saying that his strike was too weak. However, Sayok quickly proved how mistaken it was, demonstrating how easily arrogance could be diminished with a single action. With his spear wrapped in flames, Sayok delivered a slash to the monster's body, which for the first time fully understood how desperate its situation was. The monster fell to the ground, consumed by the fire that devoured its flesh and bones. Then, the monster praised him, saying it had never imagined finding someone strong enough to defeat it. Sayok replied that he does not belong to its trashy world and that he is not like them. However, the chief did not believe him, assuming he was only speaking to impress. Despite this, he was convinced that his body would be absorbed by the earth and that someday he would be resurrected. Suddenly, he noticed his existence starting to fade away, and Sayok, mocking him, asked if he finally understood the situation. The monster explained that the black flame consuming him was his special ability, which he called the Paradox Flame. It indicated that, unlike normal flames that burn with oxygen, it uses abstract concepts as fuel. He said he might have been resurrected many times in the future, but the flame burning him now would prevent him from getting up again, as his existence was fading. The chief tried to mock Sayok, saying that perhaps he had killed him but would never be remembered as the hero who saved the world, because the people he considered allies only hoped he would die in battle. Sayok responded that he already knew that. The saint quickly intervened, expressing her disbelief at the monster's words. However, she began by confessing that she had been saying she loved him, but in reality, she despised him for being an outsider. Her entire seduction was part of the plan so that, when the time came to subdue him, it would be difficult for him to attack her. The saint was surprised to realize that Sayok was right, and she continued saying that she knew the magician and the knight were just like her. Turns out, the knight had already received a national treasure from the emperor, a reward for killing Sayok, because the emperor feared he would take his throne. Regarding the magician, he adored experimenting on humans and hated Sayok for opposing the slavery system. Sayok revealed that he had known all this information for 5 years. The monster, shocked, asked why Sayok didn't conquer the world with his power. He confessed that he wasn't interested in that. He only wanted to go back home. 20 years ago, in the year 2005, Sayok was a 20-year-old office worker until a goddess transported him to this world. The goddess told him that his mission was to save him. When he arrived, he realized that the world was hell. He tried everything to return home, but the goddess warned him that he had to defeat the monsters and save that place. Since there was only one way back to Earth, Sayok began to prepare himself to fight against the monsters. Recounting how chaotic his world was, he once saved a child from the front lines of the battle. However, the soldiers did not allow him to enter the village and ordered him to let the child die, as it seemed that this was about to happen. This world turned out to be a cursed place that preferred to abandon the wounded rather than save them. The situation worsened even further due to the lack of medicine and basic hygiene conditions, which made everything much worse. On one occasion, they even had to amputate a soldier's leg due to a simple infection. Although he managed to get the child into the village, Zok faced another problem: religious fanatics. The community leaders believed the child could survive because he was possessed by a demon and proposed exorcising him with fire, as they were in the middle of an exorcism ritual. As if burning people was a routine matter, they were turning those they encountered into stone. The scene left Sayok completely in shock, unable to believe he lived in a world without human rights. Despite everything, he survived 20 long years in that environment. Finally, he managed to defeat the monster to save that world. Sayok felt a deep relief, thinking that the suffering had ended, just as a knight tried to attack him, saying they were glad to know they couldn't let him live. But Sayok turned to that man, telling him that he really hated that society. At that moment, even the knight realized that he did not have enough strength to confront him and that, in reality, those people had created a monster to control another. Then, Sayok looked up at the sky and shouted to the goddess, asking her to fulfill her promise because he had already saved the world, just as she had told him. Suddenly, the sky opened, and the goddess appeared, congratulating him on enduring so much. But Sayok was not willing to accept praise. Instead, he reminded her of her promise to return him to Earth. The goddess asked whether he truly did not like that world, despite having gained enough strength to threaten her. She explained that if he returned to Earth, his achievements as a hero would be in vain. Sayok begged her to stop playing with his feelings, convinced that she only rejoiced in his departure. The goddess agreed, saying that the world no longer needed a monster. However, she asked if he would regret his decision. He replied that the only thing he wanted was to return to the world he once knew. He was tired of that place that had led him to the depths of suffering. Moved, the goddess granted his wish. A bright golden light surrounded Sayok, and she explained that his body on Earth had perished, so she would place his soul in a new vessel. Surprised, he asked who he would be in this new life, and the goddess explained that she couldn't tell him in detail, but that he would have a body destined for a miserable end. Although she is convinced that he will survive, since that is his true skill, Sayok tells the goddess that he isn't too worried. As long as he can return to Earth, he will surely have a safer life than in his trash world. Soon after, Sayok opens his eyes in his new body and realizes that he is in the year 2025. It turns out he has taken over the body of a civilian named Chanik. With a sigh of relief, he sits up in bed, happy not to face traitors willing to kill him. Looking into a mirror, he approaches to examine himself and understand his new appearance. At that moment, he has a realization. He's back on Earth. He observes his surroundings and notices clean water at his disposal, something he couldn't enjoy in his trash world, where he struggled to start fires instead of chopping wood like a madman. He is deeply moved, celebrating the fact that he has tasted food again after years of suffering and despair. He finds a box of chicken on the table and, without much thought, takes a piece. The taste fills him with overwhelming joy, tears of happiness streaming down his face. He can finally savor something in his life. As he celebrates his return to Earth, he doesn't notice a bright red light appearing in the middle of the street, which captures his attention. Since it is now 2025, he realizes that this world and the one he came from follow the same passage of time. However, he isn't too worried, thinking that no matter how hard and tough Earth is, it will never be worse than that other world he just left. After finishing his meal, Sayak goes into the bathroom for a hot shower, taking advantage of the technology, followed by the relief of reflecting in the air-conditioned space. Then he approaches the window to look at the clear sky, trying to absorb everything he's been missing. At that moment, a grotesque-looking monster appears on the glass, staring directly at him. Sayak screams in fear, confused by what he sees. Simultaneously, a public broadcast erupts in the area, informing residents about a corrosion crack appearing in the apartment complex. He becomes utterly confused by the siren's explanation, which continues urging everyone to evacuate immediately to an underground shelter. He stays frozen until he notices that the entire window is covered with monsters trying to break into the house. Reality hits him when the glass shatters and the creatures invade inside. Sayak runs away, asking himself what kind of creatures they are, as they pursue him. Thanks to his ingenuity, he manages to jump out a window and hide on the windowsill, waiting for the danger to pass. When the monsters disappear, he climbs back up and breathes a sigh of relief, convinced that he has left them behind. Suddenly, he spots a boy in the distance and runs toward him to ask what he is doing in such a dangerous place. He suggests they quickly return to the shelter, but the boy is more worried about the monster he saw earlier, as he is determined to finish it off. He asks if the boy wants to join him, but Sayak looks at him with disdain, wondering what the hell he is saying. It turns out that the Earth has been like this for 13 years, and since the boy refuses to go to the shelter, Sayak has no choice but to follow him, eventually accompanying him on his journey. The little boy explains that a corrosion rift is a portal through which monsters emerge, although no one knows why they form, when they will appear, or where. Upon hearing this, Sayak begins to think about how his passage through the other world was a hell, only to return to a deplorable Earth. He is surprised that he has to explain things to Seo and asks why he knows nothing about it. Seo responds that he has been living in the United States, but this creates another confusion, since people cannot cross from that country to Korea. The boy looks at him incredulously, not understanding what his interlocutor is saying. Sayak manages to change the subject and asks him about the hunter he mentioned and that he likes. The boy replies that her name is Lee Kyun, she belongs to the Jabe Guild, and ranks 10th in the worldwide ranking. She, he explains, uses a great sword, and at this moment she is in Cheran facing a corrosion rift. The more the boy tells about Kyun, the more Sayak is grateful that he diverted from his personal matters and can focus on that story. However, he cannot help but be surprised by the idea that an ordinary human female fights monsters as if she were in the other world he came from. As the boy continues explaining everything he knows about Kyun, Sayak can only take a deep breath, relieved that the conversation has shifted. But he still finds it hard to accept that an ordinary person is facing terrifying creatures as if it's nothing. Just as he turns his head to look at him, the boy is already trembling. Sayak cannot believe that all his determination to destroy the monsters evaporated the moment he saw one. He is confused, unsure of what to do, as he carries no weapons. Suddenly, he detects a mana presence in the air, and upon confirming it, realizes it is the same as in the other world. Without hesitation, he decides to attack the monsters. He leaves his hiding spot and strikes one with the paradoxic flame, feeling that he can still use the ability imprinted in his soul from that other dimension. Although the power does not meet his expectations, he is convinced it will be enough for what he needs. The monster's head disintegrates in an agonizing explosion of pain, while the boy congratulates Sayak, acknowledging the admirable feat he has just performed. Part 6 of 44. Without wasting time, He approaches Shok, whom he admires as his master, highlighting that he possesses a unique skill. Shok immediately understands that the uncommon techniques on Earth are considered exclusive. These qualities are highly valued in his world. The monster still blazes with flames, but the young man decides he must confirm the enemy's death. Quickly, he runs toward the area where the flames remain active, although Sayok tries to warn him to be careful and not to get too close until the target is completely inert. Just as it seemed he was about to be hit by the flames, Sayok steps in, blocking them with his hands and sustaining some injuries in the process. With effort, he asks the boy to stop watching things online, as reality is far from what movies depict. Then, Zok takes the staff he carried and uses it to knock down the approaching monsters threateningly. The skillful way he maneuvers, as if holding a real sword, leaves the young man completely astonished. The boy asks if he is secretly a master hunter. Meanwhile, Sayok is not entirely satisfied with how his new life has begun. Feeling trapped in a past he tried to leave behind. Soon after, they arrive at a shelter, and he begins calling him Brat instead of a primary school child, adjusting his perception. Upon entering, the boy's mother recognizes him and calls out his name, Yunong. She quickly runs to embrace him, thanking Sayok for having delivered him safely, knowing how difficult it must have been for him. While the mother hugs her son, Sayok notices he is wearing expensive clothes, a sign that the family is wealthy. Immediately, he understands why Sayong can behave like a spoiled child. At that moment, a creature breaks down the shelter's outer wall, causing total chaos among the people, who flee in panic. The destruction of the wall surprises everyone, and as they try to escape, Shaun calls Sayok to follow them. However, Sayok stays there, angry and bewildered, unable to believe all this is happening just when he longs to return to a normal life. Frustration and resentment surge within him. Doubts about whether he's asking for too much consume him. He looks at his burned palm from saving Seong and affectionately calls him Brat, his nickname. Then he asks why he wants to become a hunter if his family is clearly wealthy and doesn't need to fight to survive. He knows that the young man could hide somewhere comfortable and live in peace, avoiding dangers. At that moment, Seong reveals the sad reality of how he lost his father because of a monster. The story recounts that a corrosion portal opened in an underground bunker where they were sheltering. Everyone believed themselves to be safe, but that day Seong understood the cruel truth. There are no guarantees of protection anywhere on the planet. He says he is not strong enough yet, but his goal is to become the most powerful hunter in order to eradicate the corrosion breaches and save the world from that threat. Seong expresses his thoughts with full determination and confesses to Sue that, although it may seem foolish, he actually aspires to become a great hunter. However, Sue interrupts him, assuring that he will not succeed in saving the world. Sean's mother starts to panic and tells her son that it's time to leave. Seong hesitates because Sayok is still facing the monster. Suddenly, a bright glow appears behind them, and when they turn around, they are stunned to see that Sayok has defeated the enemy with his paradoxical flame. Shuk states that he will not be able to save the world because if he could, he already would have. Smiling, Shuk tells Seong that saving the Earth is the task of someone who has already done it before. After the calm settles in and after Sayok promises Sayong that he will fight to save the world, he decides to go back to his apartment to play video games and eat junk food. Although he initially confidently declared he would save the planet, that confidence quickly faded, as he no longer felt the same urgency. The abundance of food and entertainment made him feel unnecessary, since there were hunters dedicated to that mission 24/7. So he picks up his phone and orders more fast food, only to suddenly realize that he has run out of money. It turns out that the person who previously inhabited his body worked for a logistics company, which disappeared when a corrosion hole led it to bankruptcy. Now he realizes he needs to find a job, but options are limited. The majority of companies have shut down due to recurring corrosion portals. Confused, he is overwhelmed by an uncertain future. While lying frustrated on his bed, he receives a notification about a hunter's recruitment call. Since he already has experience in that field, Sayok decides to go to the Hunters Association. Upon arrival, he notices many people with the same intention. He overhears two young people discussing that the selection process is just a formality, as recent times have shown that demonstrating a unique skill is enough to be chosen. Everything seems normal until a legendary figure appears at the scene, causing chaos among the applicants. The crowd cheers at her arrival because many thought she wouldn't return after going to Chaoran to face a corrosion portal. The candidates deduce that the Janabe squad probably sent Kyun to select the best. But this raises a question. For whom are they really there? It turns out that among the hopefuls is a young woman named Han Sa, a graduate of an academy, whose special ability is electrokinesis. While reviewing his file, Cyan jokes with Sa about his power, asking if he can recharge batteries. His assistant quickly reminds him that the girl is a hunter, not an energy generator. She mentions that there are rumors about Sa's skill with his ability, suggesting he will be quite useful in the fight. Another canon assistant interrupts, pointing out that hunting and facing corrosion cracks are real battles, and although the candidates excel at the academy, many do not perform well in actual confrontations. Canon praises his companion's creativity and offers him a candy, which he looks at with disdain. CIA knows well that practice and training and real combat are very different, making it difficult for academy students to adapt quickly to a genuine fight. She thinks that it will take Sa quite some time to get used to the reality of combat. A few moments later, the host steps onto the stage to welcome the arena's attendees, informing them that the first match is about to begin and hoping that Sa will be able to show his valor. He also mentions that the first participant is a peculiar candidate, as he does not come from the Hunter Academy, which is unusual under these circumstances. He wonders how brave this person must be to face them there, and when he calls his name, Suk is introduced to the crowd. His opponent also enters the arena, and the host explains the rules. No personal weapons other than those provided by the organization are allowed, and causing injuries that could endanger life is prohibited. Deep down, Suk simply wants to save the world, enjoy a good life, and live on his own terms. To accomplish this, he understands he must perform well in the tournament. When everything is ready, the referee signals the start of the fight, and Suk's opponent ignites his spear, mocking him and telling him he's useless, that he doesn't even know how to channel mana. Having done nothing but provoke him, the opponent tells him to consider his defeat an honor and rushes towards Suk, boasting about being the undefeated spear-throwing master from the Hunter Academy. Suddenly, the opponent realizes he cannot discern Suk's position. Before he can understand what's happening, Suk appears beside him and lands a blow to his abdomen, causing intense pain. Without stopping, he delivers a lock, raising his fist to leave him stunned. The opponent falls to his knees, with several broken teeth and amid sharp pain. Suk is surprised, thinking the opponent should already be on the ground and that perhaps he's been too cautious, not wanting to seriously injure him. He assumes that the opponent is just a novice, that his weakness is due to inexperience, and refuses to accept that this might be the true strength of rookie hunters. Part 9 of 44. Cun, for her part, witnessed her rival's fall and was impressed by Suk's speed. Without wasting any time, she pulled out her tablet to investigate her opponent's full history. She discovered that he was simply an ordinary man working at a logistics company who didn't even possess any mana in his body. One of Son's assistants commented that Suk's strike might have been lucky, but Cyan replied with a piece of trash candy, a subtle way of telling him to shut up. She also made it clear that Sayo was deliberately not accumulating mana. Back in the arena, Sayak decided to end the fight once and for all, feeling the need to prove his competence. Without hesitation, he charged after his opponent, who nearly peed himself out of fear when he saw him approaching. Sayak assured him that he wouldn't give a mortal wound to calm him down. Although he promised to go easy, Telegram ended up knocking him to the ground, thus securing the first victory of the day. The news left all the officials speechless, and Cun noticed that the other guilds were already planning their next moves. However, Son decided to act proactively, eager to discover Sayak's true character. When her colleague asked where she was going, she replied that she needed to go to the guild's headquarters. Meanwhile, during the competition, Sayak continued defeating his opponents with relative ease. SH was disappointed by the fragility of the so-called new hunters, as they didn't even use weapons and instead punched their way through with bare fists. In the end, Sayok felt disillusioned with the training he was receiving at the Hunter Academy, as he hadn't faced any truly skilled candidates yet. Soon afterwards, he reached the final against S.A., who was everyone's hope to stop his dominance. When S.A. took the stage, Sayok praised her, pointing out that she was the only one who had accumulated more mana than the others. S.A. responded that his success had been pure luck, but warned him that there would be no more coincidences. She took her sword in her hands and declared that she had discovered that Sayok didn't possess any unique skills, only blows without much skill. However, she made it clear that she had no intention of easing up. Nervous, Sayok thanked her for her consideration and for a special ability she possessed, though he had no intention of using it against her. Then S.A. took a deep breath, focusing her mana to unleash chaos in her fight against Sayok. As she prepared to attack, she ran toward him, but to her surprise, Sayok jumped into the air to dodge her strike, something that seemed impossible, almost like jumping to avoid lightning. S.A.'s ability impressed Sayok, who acknowledged that she had made his sword and handle become magnetic by passing an electric current through them. Thus, he added a magnetic force to the impulse of drawing the sword, transforming it into a railgun-like weapon. With this, he indicated to S.A. that he had been the best so far, but that he still lacked an important detail. He explained that his focus was too much on attacking quickly, neglecting other crucial aspects of combat. His fundamental mistake was placing a magnetic rail in the empty air to further accelerate the drawn sword. Sayok pointed out that, no matter how fast and powerful it was, no idiot would attack along a visible trajectory. However, S.A. still believes it was a coincidence and warns him not to be overconfident, because he can defeat people like him without that technique. With a different technique, somewhat slower, he dashed towards Seo, who easily dodges the attack effortlessly, asking if he is really that clumsy since he dodged his fastest technique and now tries to hit him with another much slower one. To not be surpassed by Seo, Sana unleashes a power that breaks the ground, aware that she is pushing herself too hard, and that if she continues at this pace, she will end up destroyed. Shuk then decides to end the fight, stating that they have enjoyed themselves enough. He provokes her, asking if what he is about to do hurts, she should raise her left hand. Before S.A. can react, Shuk reaches her and hits her in the abdomen, causing a disruption in her organs. While she tries to process what happened, Sayok finishes the fight with another blow that sends Sana flying away to a distance. Sana falls unconscious, surprising everyone, as no one expected Sayok to be able to defeat the Academy's top student. Sayok turns to leave the arena but notices that S.A. is raising her left hand, recalling the joke he played on her, and is surprised that she actually lifted it. Before she can escape, the referee receives an important update and announces that the tournament schedule has changed, ordering Seo to take a brief rest, leaving Seo confused, as the fight should have already ended. Then, the referee reveals something even more astonishing. Seo will have a special match against an active hunter, which leaves everyone impressed. The audience watches on the screen, which only they can see, that the hunter is Seoen, and Sayok begins to wonder if she is there to test her skills. The warrior, with her great sword, steps onto the stage saying she must fight Sayok because there's no other way to prove her level. She introduces herself and the organization she serves, suggesting that the fight will be fair and that Sayok can refuse if she considers it too sudden. Upon seeing her up close, Sayok understands why Seoen holds the 10th place in the world rankings, as her presence and aura are imposing. Part 11 of 44. Although he knows that facing Seoen in his current state will be difficult, he does not lose his resolve and enthusiastically accepts the challenge. Shuk proposes to start the fight immediately, surprising the referee with his decision. Calmly, he reveals that he has not yet exhausted most of his stamina, and therefore feels in good shape. Aiming for the best possible outcome in the tournament, Sayok concludes that fighting would be useful to achieve his goal. Then, he takes his spear, hoping to assess if he can increase his strength in the fight. After 30 minutes of combat, Sayok is still standing, although he is already fighting against Seoen's overwhelming power. He struggles to accept that he is facing a woman with such a resilient body. However, he manages to push Seoen back and realizes that her speed has decreased compared to the early moments of the fight. Shuk sees opportunities to attack Cun, but his body doesn't respond with the necessary agility to exploit those openings. Sweat covers his face, and his exhaustion is evident after half an hour of fighting, prompting Cun to mock him, saying she expected a good warm-up and cannot believe Sayok is already so tired. Despite this, Cun is surprised by Seo's endurance, as she expected him to fall within the first 5 minutes. Then, Cyan runs towards Seo intending to end the fight quickly. Seeing Cyan approaching, Sayok begins to consider what action to take. He realizes that he has no mana left stored and that even the mana in the air is scant. Although he didn't want to use his special ability, he understands that he has no choice. Just as Sunin is about to reach him, he activates the Paradox Flame. Thanks to this, he manages to dodge an attack at the last moment. Cun is surprised, convinced that with such strength and precision, it was impossible for Sayok to evade, but he succeeds. Moreover, he notices a black flame burning on his body, which piques his curiosity. Shock smiles, knowing he has just accessed the power he trusts most before returning to Earth. The Paradox Flame, unlike conventional fire, does not burn physical matter but consumes abstract concepts that he has designated as fuel. At that moment, Sayok cannot burn concepts with high ignition points, such as memory or reason, leaving him with only one practical concept to use: exhaustion. Without hesitation, he runs towards Son, now even faster. With a powerful strike, he forces Suin to block fiercely and is surprised at how quickly Sayok recovers. The fight escalates as both cross their weapons, resonating with sounds and flashes. Cyan perceives that the mana concentration in the air fluctuates between high and low levels, which is unusual, since the conditions of the scene have not changed. It is discovered that the Paradox Flame releases mana when burning abstract concepts. Just as fire produces heat by burning matter, now it is Sayok's turn to use mana to ignite the Paradox Flame. The Paradox Flame, in its incandescent paradox, consumes its own fatigue to generate more mana, creating an endless cycle. Both fighters face each other, destroying the arena floor with their powerful attacks. All of this happens thanks to Sayok's resilience, who is accustomed to a war of attrition and does not give up easily. At one point, Sun asks if he believes he can keep going like this, and he responds confidently that yes. She inquires if he likes guys who don't know how to give up, to which he replies that he hates them. Just as burnt trees leave ashes, it turns out that the Paradox Flame also leaves a residue after its passage. If everything in the fight is consumed until only that ash remains, the flame will finally disappear. After 4 hours of intense combat, Cyan manages to defeat his opponent, and Siwon congratulates him on his prolonged endurance. When she declares herself the winner, she pulls out a giant lollipop from her pocket and gives it to Shuk, explaining that it is a reward for his effort. Additionally, she informs him that her business card is also in the same lollipop. Shuk checks the card, and Cyan assures him that they will discuss the details later. She asks him to call her during that interval, and with the conclusion of the selection tests, Silk is called to the front to receive his prize. Days later, Su reviews the data on his phone and realizes that almost all the information he needs is on the card. As he approaches to meet someone, he bumps into a huge man who stops him abruptly. He asks for his name but simply hands him Sayok's card. Su examines the data and confirms that the man's name is Yoon Ong Hyun, a fellow hunter from the Tibet Guild. Without wasting time, he urges Sayok to join that guild, promising he could become a star if he decides to join and gain experience there. Sayok looks him in the eyes and perceives that he's not lying, although he remembers he already has commitments with Siwon and cannot give an immediate answer. Calmly, Sayok tells him he needs to think about it, but Han laughs in his face, assuring him that he has no intention of waiting for a response at that moment. At that instant, he grabs him by the shoulder and steps closer, warning him to carefully consider his decision. After these words, he says goodbye, stating they will likely meet again. However, Sayok quickly concludes that the Tibet Guild is not part of his plans. So he makes a call to Sunin, asking where they should meet. Siuen instructs him to go to a kind of cabin located on the second floor of the Hunters Association building. Soon after, Sayaka arrives at the place, which appears to be a cafe. Upon entering, Cyan calls Sayaka to his table and, noticing his expression, asks if something is bothering him. Sayaka reveals that a very bulky man named Hyan tried to sign him up, and that for now he must decide which path to take in his career. Son is surprised to see Hyan's interest in Seo and lets him know that the other guilds wouldn't dare make him an offer again. Sayaka then asks if this also applies to Janabe. At that moment, Cyan reveals something shocking. He has no interest in recruiting him, which leaves Sayaka wondering why he wanted to meet with him in the first place. He explains that he would prefer him to work as a freelancer, without being tied to any guild. Additionally, he mentions that Hyan probably would have offered him a subordinate position. This confuses Sayaka, who asks what exactly that means and what being a hunter partner or associate entails. Since he is not from the Hunters Academy, Cyan clarifies that the categories within guilds are usually divided into 3 levels: novices, senior hunters, and partners. Novices and seniors are part of teams led by associate hunters and, essentially, work with salaries or fees. In contrast, partner hunters do not receive a fixed salary. Instead, they hold shares in the guild and participate in its net profits. In simple terms, they are akin to business owners. This structure is inspired by legal firm models that the founders of the guilds used in their early days. It turns out that becoming a partner hunter does not require membership in a guild or passing through the novice and senior categories. Finally, Sayaka understands that, in essence, if he manages to become famous and achieve extraordinary results, big guilds will come after him without hesitation. Cyan confirms this and, laughing, hands him a sweet, while he wonders why she's giving him candies with such a strange attitude. Shook recalls that he has no connections or contacts, so obtaining important requests will be difficult. However, she assures him that she will help him with this aspect free of charge. Surprised, Sayaka realizes why she would go to such lengths. She simply wishes that, in the future, he would remember that a guild called Janabi helped him when he was still a stranger. In short, Son is helping Suk so that she can owe him a debt of gratitude. Afterwards, they give him an envelope and tell him he can decide whether or not to accept the mission described inside. She asks what it is, and Cyan reveals that it's a request from the city of Inian. It appears that, 2 years ago, a corrosion zone was formed on the island called Jayadongo after a failed attempt to eliminate a corrosion fissure. Sayaka asks if his task will be to eliminate that fissure, but Sean clarifies that his job is to patrol the island, and if new fissures appear, he must confront them. The mission will begin in 1 month, and Sayaka will receive an advance payment of 5 million, plus an additional 15 million if he successfully completes the task. Sayaka comments that the pay isn't very attractive considering the high risk involved. Cyan advises him to strengthen himself and become famous so that in the future he can be offered better rates. Then, he asks what decision Sayaka has made, and as expected, Sayaka accepts the mission. After some time, Cyan has a call with his superior to tell him how incredible Sayaka is. The boss asks who this man is, and she explains that he is a civilian who passed the selection tests on his own. The superior doesn't consider this extraordinary, but Cun informs him that Sayaka spent almost 4 hours fighting her. Despite that, the boss thinks Sayaka kept up this resistance because he was playing with her. Cyan reminds him that she is an experienced hunter with a decade of experience, all based on surviving in hellish places. She explains that, under normal circumstances, she could have manipulated Sayaka, but he fought her for nearly 4 hours. Cun admits how extraordinary Sayaka is, asserting that he probably will never see a monster like that again. Tired of her admiration, the boss asks if the mission assigned to Sayaka required hunters with prior experience. He's worried that, despite Sayaka's skill, he might not be able to face veteran hunters. But Cyan reassures him, saying she has already assigned a reliable partner, Sangha. The authority decides to trust Cun's judgment, as he is the one coordinating in the guild's operations room. Then, the boss asks what Cun thinks about what will happen when Sayaka reaches his level, and she confidently responds that at that moment, Sayaka would also be capable of defeating him. A month ago, Sayaka received an order to his apartment for a lance and an elixir. The latter is an emergency use potion containing condensed mana, very useful in critical moments. When it comes to manipulating mana, it's comparable to drinking purified water. It can be controlled in the atmosphere, stored in the body, and even used on demand. The elixir allows him to do all this in a short time. However, Sayok uses mana differently from others, as he avoids storing it and absorbs it directly from the environment. The advantage is that there is no limit. He uses the mana from the air, without needing to store it beforehand. Additionally, in the process of absorption and release, the mana channels that cross through him gradually strengthen, allowing him to handle larger amounts. The only drawback is that until his mana channels mature, the volume he can manage is small, making it difficult to produce great power in a short time. Without hesitation, Sayok decides to take advantage of that mana, since there is no time to lose. He is convinced that, in a month of training, his body will have improved. Now, in the present day, the hunters line up to verify their identities before entering the island. When Sayok's identity was confirmed, they informed him that he belonged to Squadron Number 8. He silently joined his comrades as they all spoke in a monotone voice, like parrots repeating endlessly. At that moment, he heard someone call his name, and when he looked up, he realized it was Sangha. She was wearing a sleeveless shirt and bore a scar crossing her shoulder. It turned out that both of them belonged to the same squadron, and the SA suggested that they work together on the mission. Seo asked why he should accept that proposal, and she reminded him that he was stronger than her. That's why she believed he could learn from Suk. But Seo joked that his shoulder looked about to dislocate due to the excessive redness. The SA's inability to take a joke was once again evident when she asked Seo if his shoulders dislocated frequently. He remembered how she literally raised her hand during their confrontation, demonstrating how little sense of humor she had. A few moments later, the squad was called and received the official mission briefing. Since among them there were new hunters, particularly Suk, the commander explained that corrosion cracks are classified into first, second, and third categories, in addition to unclassified ones. The closer a crack is to Category 1, the more dangerous it is. He added that the first corrosion crack detected in a specific area is also called Alpha. Currently, the location of this Alpha crack on the island is near a church in the north. However, he clarified that the corrosion hasn't been officially classified yet. Since corrosion worsens over time, he advised them not to get too close to the area. The mission was to patrol the zone to detect and eliminate any additional cracks that might have formed. A squad member with yellow hair was surprised to hear they were going on an elimination mission with a novice among them. Before Suk noticed, he realized that the entire squad was acting strangely toward him, as if he were a beginner. Before departing, they were informed that the maritime control room was active and they could communicate there if they needed help. With this news, the hunters set out somewhat cautiously. Upon arriving on the island, experienced hunters began to plan, but Shu intervened, suggesting they establish a base at the Wajisa temple to operate from there. He showed the location of the temple on the map, but the veterans couldn't believe that a novice was giving them instructions. Additionally, they wanted to know why he was heading to the temple, and Suk explained that from there, one could observe the entire target area. From the top, the whole region was clearly visible as well. He mentioned that the old temple building was still available to be used as accommodation, the most obvious option. Experienced hunters began to protest, demanding other places to stay, and even asked what they would do if they found themselves surrounded after climbing another mountain. Seo reminded them that they weren't facing thousands of enemies, so there was no risk of being encircled. Although Suk tried to persuade them, the hunters insisted they had no reason to follow his orders, as he lacked experience. He was shocked to discover that there were also idiots on Earth, just like in the other world. Not wanting to follow him, Sayok proposed that each of them go their own way. Without wasting time, he headed toward the temple accompanied by SA. To his surprise, the man with the yellow head, who had appeared earlier, also followed them, and Sayok didn't understand why someone else was joining. He asked for his name, Kim Minja, and why he was doing it. Minja boasted that he was following to watch them, considering them amateurs. Sayok appreciated the attention, amazed that there was still a decent person in that squad. Suddenly, Suk stopped completely, ordering the others to do the same. He asked for silence and told Minja to look behind the cover. To their surprise, monsters appeared along the way, about 50 in total, and he quickly suggested taking a different route. He asked Minja what his special ability was, which confused him, as he didn't want to believe that Sayok dared to confront the monsters. Shuk clarified that, in his opinion, it was usual for a hunter to fight those creatures, and he asked again about the unique ability. Mia responded that she had flames and questioned which skill he trusted more, revealing her power was a fireball. Sayok was satisfied and told Mia that he would attack the monsters on his signal. Ma protested, calling the strategy reckless, given that there were only 3 of them against at least 50 enemies. Furthermore, she argued that on a first mission, it would be better to alert the other hunters, calling them via radio while there was still time. Shuk commented that the other hunters probably wouldn't arrive in time, since, unlike them, who left directly from the Huajia temple, the others were still searching along the coast. Shiel added that calling at that moment would be risky because there was no guarantee that the other hunters would answer, and if the monsters dispersed, they could pose a threat to all hunters in the area. Deep down, Minja knew Shuk was right. The other hunters might take time to arrive, as they had faced a conflict that same day. Sayok told them that their only option was to face the monsters on their own. Although the situation seemed unfavorable, he believed a surprise attack would be their best strategy. As time was pressing, he began to draw the plan in the sand. He explained that he would be the first to throw a fireball at the center, while Ma would take care of blocking the sides. While Sayok executed his plan, Minja was completely impressed, unable to believe that Sayok anticipated every scenario with such precision, as if he were already used to similar situations. Once Sayok explained his strategy, Minja sprang into action and launched a fireball at the monsters, causing an explosion that devoured several of them. Then he retreated, aware that he would need time to charge another fireball. At that moment, Shok took the initiative and continued the attack, urging Ma to shoot another fireball as soon as it was ready. Minja obeyed the command without hesitation, attacking fearlessly and cutting through the enemies with a speed that seemed almost butter-like. As someone who values efficiency in missions, Minja has always believed in distributing tasks. He planned to confront the monsters until he could launch another fireball, even though he knew he couldn't block them all by himself. That's why dividing roles is crucial. Any creature that dodges Sayok's blow ends up being finished off by SA, who stands behind. Shortly after, Minja informed Sayok that he was ready to launch another fireball, and Sayok quickly moved aside, allowing Minja to deliver another devastating strike. In no time, the enemies were eliminated, and Sayok congratulated them on their combat effectiveness. At that moment, Minja pulled out a weapon, surprising Sayok, who, before they could alarm him, asked them to step back. Sayok, relieved, sighed upon noticing that Minja had no intention of shooting at them. Then, he implanted a microchip into a dead monster, explaining that once the mission was over and the area secured, the scrap dealer with whom he has a contract would come to collect the bodies. Sayok didn't fully understand what this dealer was intending, but Mia clarified that retrieving the subproducts from the corpses was difficult because of their weight. Marking them with chips allows the dealers to approach after the mission and collect the valuable parts. Then they evaluate the objects, sell them, and split the profits. The commission is calculated according to the contract, and the rest is divided with the hunter who placed the chip. Sayok asked if he could trust these dealers, and Minja responded that that's why it's crucial to find a good deal with one. Minja then praised Seo, telling him it was incredible that the 3 of them managed to defeat 50 monsters. However, at that moment, Seo's senses alerted him that something was wrong. Without hesitation, he grabbed Minji and lunged forward to dodge a surprise attack from a huge monster that was lurking nearby. Fortunately, Minji managed to escape unnoticed, leaving Seo wondering what had attacked them. Shok examined the creature more closely and recognized it as a mid-level boss. The presence of that monster surprised Sayok, who began to wonder if this was the boss of the others they had just defeated. Sayok also checked to ensure this was no joke, as the amount of mana it emitted was clearly much higher than that of the enemies they had faced before. Without hesitation, he ordered Ma and Sa to keep their distance and told them that he would handle the creature himself. Although Ma and Sa thought about helping by flanking, Sayok angrily shouted at them to retreat, warning that if they didn't, they would have to go back home in a body bag. The seriousness in Sayok's voice caused both to step back immediately. Deep down, he was already analyzing that it would be better if he fought the monster alone, as there was no one to stop him from acting clearly. He thought it would be enough to use the paradox flame to confront it. When everything was ready, Sayok challenged the creature, daring it to attack him. Soon after, Minja asked Sana if they weren't going to help Sayok, since he appeared to be in trouble. Sa responded that it wasn't necessary, because although it seemed the hunter was having difficulties, he hadn't even been touched since the fight began. Additionally, the attacks Sayok dodges so easily are ones she herself would struggle to avoid. Essentially, Sayok combines dodging and attacking at the same time. Sa also noticed that each time Sayok's lance hits, a black flame appears, making her wonder what that flame is. The more flames there are, the slower the monster becomes. At first, it looked like Sayok was having trouble, but in reality he was just having fun with the creature. Sunga was completely stunned, unable to believe that a novice hunter like Sayok could so easily defeat such a formidable monster. After finishing off the beast, Sayok did something unexpected. He threw his lance into the air while the creature desperately charged at him at full speed. Sa was frightened, thinking that the monster was about to kill him. But just as the creature was about to reach him, the lance fell from above and crushed it. Sayok didn't even flinch, demonstrating full confidence in his abilities. He praised the monster for its still mobility despite being exhausted and scorched. Then, SH decided it was time to end the creature. Minja was completely astonished by what he had just witnessed, convinced that it couldn't be that simple for Sayok to have defeated such a powerful enemy. After defeating the monster, Sayok asked if it was normal for a creature of that strength to appear on the island. Minja admitted that he had also been wondering about that, because that monster didn't even match the core of the corrosion fissure. He thought it might have been a problem if they considered themselves to be dealing with a grade 3 or higher fissure. At that moment, Sayok recalls that during the orientation they mentioned that the alpha corrosion crack has no classification. As such, he decides to inform the others that the alpha corrosion crack on the island has advanced to grade 3. Sa does not want to accept this, since in the initial meeting they said something different, but Sayok urges him to think rationally. He explains that there is no way to explain the situation if the corrosion is not grade 3. Mia reacts with alarm upon hearing this, as the difference between an unclassified crack and a grade 3 one is like night and day. Minji reveals that, if this is true, the hunters are in serious danger and perhaps won't even make it back alive. Immediately, she suggests they go to rescue the other hunters, because with Sayok's skills they still have a chance. However, he quickly rejects the idea, stating he is not interested. Mina asks why he refuses this option, and he explains that he doesn't plan to save all the hunters on his own. He reminds them that he is also human and has his limits. He clarifies that his mission is not to rescue stranded hunters, but to identify and eliminate new corrosion breaches that may have appeared. Furthermore, he makes it clear that not everyone will make it out alive, as that is part of his job. Afterwards, Seo asks what he would do if he were also in a risky situation. Sayok does not understand her intention, and she tells him that in that case, he would be begging to be saved. With a firm voice, Sayok explains that he does not reject help because he does not understand human emotions. He tells them he only mentions that possibility to point out that deaths in this world are inevitable. He warns them that, faced with death, the most common response for those confronting that reality is simply to die. Moments later, he asks them not to act on emotions, as in such a cruel world they would not survive with that mentality. Later, they arrive at the temple and, after inspecting the place, Sayok assures that the building is safe. Mina notes that it's positive they can locate the other hunters thanks to their lights. However, Shul does not fully agree, since using illumination could be an open invitation for enemies. She knows that monsters will be able to handle common enemies, but fears that a stronger monster might appear again, as before. So, Sayok decides to issue a warning, alerting the hunters that the breach could have escalated to grade 3. He asks them to be careful when using the lights, as this could put them in danger. Then, Sayok asks Minja if, by destroying the core of the breach, the other monsters will also disappear. She confirms that they will. He explains that without the energy emitted by the breach, the contaminated zone will vanish. Hearing this, Sayok concludes that his mission is clear: to destroy the corrosion breach. That same night, while the others sleep, he prepares to leave. Before leaving, he leaves an alarm device that will activate if a monster approaches. He trusts he will be able to return without issues, and along his way through the forest, he feels satisfied having confirmed the location of the Alpha breach during preparation. Sayok believed everything would be resolved easily, but soon he realizes he was mistaken when he encounters an even more terrifying creature than the previous one. A higher-level monster that seems to possess disconcerting power. In the Hunters Association's control room, panic takes over the team as they lose contact with some members of their fifth group, presumed dead. As if that weren't enough, reports arrive of coordinated monster movements, and the loss of a position in the third team is confirmed. The group leader shouts in frustration, unable to understand the problem, since the hunters are supposed to be investigating an unclassified corrosion fissure. Amidst the tension, the leader declares a formal emergency and warns that reinforcements are urgently needed. He orders the activation of the emergency contact network and sends an urgent help request to all hunters in the area. While managing these protocols, they receive news that someone is approaching the Alpha corrosion fissure. This news sends shockwaves through the leader, who orders his subordinates to contact that person and tell them to stop. An officer reports that the hunter approaching the Alpha fissure is CO from the 8th Squad. Without a doubt, the leader orders their terminals to be connected to confirm if he is alive and operational. To their surprise, CO is the first to grasp the seriousness of the situation, as an update on the fissure is an unprecedented event. He then realizes that, being the only one heading toward the Alpha corrosion, he is probably the only one with answers. Once they manage to contact him, CO is already bravely confronting the terrifying beast he encountered. Sayok shouts from the command center, reprimanding those who conducted no thorough investigation to verify whether the fissure is truly an unclassified corrosion. He calls him in every way possible, leaving the officers considering silencing him to avoid his reaction. While fleeing from the creature, Sayok discovers that his paradox flame does not have enough power to defeat the monster with a single strike, so he must weaken its health with the flame and finish it off with his spear. However, he faces a problem. He has exhausted too much mana in his previous confrontation with a mid-level enemy, causing his flame to weaken. Since he cannot leave the island, he decides to find a place where he can recharge his mana. After running for a few minutes, he finally finds what he was searching for: the Alpha fissure. Without hesitation, he launches himself toward it while provoking the creature, telling it to keep up because he needs to verify something important. From the control room, everyone was stunned when Sayok's GPS signal suddenly disappeared, realizing that he had entered the Alpha corrosion fissure. Once inside, Sayok expressed surprise at how clean the environment was compared to other fissures, reinforcing the feeling that something unusual was happening. The size of the crack was truly colossal, and Shook couldn't help but wonder how large the first and second grade fissures would be if the unclassified one reached such dimensions. At that moment, the main creature appeared, and Sayok understood that it was time to end the battle. He had always had a problem with the paradox flame, that it only extended to all living beings except himself. The flame could destroy an ally, and sometimes it even reached uncontrollable levels. This was the only drawback of his ability, but when fighting alone it was not an obstacle as he could fight his way. Without hesitation, Sayok swung his weapon and unleashed a powerful wave of fire toward the creature, while absorbing mana from every corner of his body. This expanded his magical energy channels, further strengthening his presence. Taking a deep breath after this action allowed him to feel what he had been missing until then. At that moment, the beast let out a sharp cry, and Sayok quickly understood its strategy. Soon, other monsters appeared in the area, but he was not surprised because he knew that the terrifying scream had been a call for reinforcements. However, he communicated to the main creature that a numbers-based fight would be useless. Zoe, for his part, surrounded himself with a barrier of flames that annihilated the enemies, assuring him that, although he was not as powerful as in the other world, his strength had already improved. According to Mina, the core of the fissure would be the strongest creature in the dimensional hole. Suddenly, a monster capable of speech attacked from behind, but Sayok managed to dodge it in time. When he looked back, his eyes met with a grotesque monster gazing intently at him. Surprised by its intelligence, since it could communicate and wait for his paradox flame to die out, Sayok deduced that this monster was the core of the fissure. With his current level, he believed it was possible to perform a 4-hit combo, and without hesitation, he acted. He threw his spear at the creature, which blocked the attack with its own spear. But the force of the impact squeezed the spear, and at that moment Shaw activated his double-orbit spear ability. Suddenly, the spear emitted an energy explosion that pierced through the monster's spear and penetrated its body, unleashing a powerful blast that destroyed the enemy. The double-orbit spear generated a blue trajectory that traced the attack route, mimicking the first strike and repeating it 4 times. Basically, it was a technique that replicated 4 consecutive attacks, and if the trajectory attacked with a slight delay, it managed to complete a complex double-launch move very difficult to dodge. At that moment, the creature started jumping towards Sayok, ready to reach him. However, this was her mistake, as the lance managed to close in at the right moment, trapping her. Sayok gripped the lance and delivered a powerful blow that cut through the monster, followed by a final attack that Wanchen destroyed its body. Surprisingly, after defeating the creature, it did not disappear immediately, as Shook received a box. Meanwhile, those left in the control room remained in a panic, convinced that everything was over, even though the monsters continued spreading. The team watched in horror, believing that only a miracle could save them, because all the hunters were about to be eliminated after rejecting the additional help requested. Suddenly, the leader received news that Sayok, the explorer who entered the crack, had sent a message. He demanded details of the mission, which appeared on the main screen. To everyone's astonishment, Seo informed them that the alpha acid problem had been resolved. As he said, they began to see signs that the crack was closing, and with it, all the monsters started to fade away. The leader was stunned to hear this, as it seemed a miracle just like the one he had prayed for. However, he wondered how Suk had achieved this. A few minutes earlier, Sana and Minja were surrounded by a group of creatures. With Seo absent, Minja asked Sa if they had any chance of survival, to which she understood that they were already at their limit. She herself didn't know how much she could resist. Suddenly, one of the monsters lunged at them, and Sa prepared to fight, but recognized an unsettling truth. She had no energy left, her legs were unresponsive. Sana closed her eyes, waiting for the inevitable. In an unexpected turn, Sayok managed to destroy the core at that very moment, causing the monsters to start disappearing. Later, Sayok reached the hunter's rendezvous point on the island, where he saw many wounded people. He realized that the corrosive creatures had wreaked havoc while he was away. The other hunters, who had previously been unwilling to cooperate with Seo, already knew that he had closed the crack alone, which left everyone speechless, as a third-degree crack is not something a novice can handle easily. Soon, Sayok gathered his colleagues, and Minja expressed her amazement that he had faced the crack alone. Suk explained that deep inside, his heart wanted to do the right thing. However, Suk had already decided to act like a hero, considering that things had gone well so far. As they talked, an officer approached and told him that he was Baeon Jong-tae, representative of the Korea Operations Corporation. It turned out he was the third manager of the branch in Incheon province, in the north. Baeon informed Sayok that the mayor wanted to see him. Moments later, Sayok arrived at the mayor's office in heavy rain, feeling not too uncomfortable, since his intention was to renegotiate the reward owed to him. Upon arrival, he was welcomed by Lee Pilge, the communications officer and official liaison. As they headed to the mayor's office, Pilge told Sayok that the mayor had been eagerly awaiting this meeting. He confided that he was shocked to receive the report from the island, as the mayor canceled all his plans after obtaining it. Sayok joked that he shouldn't have bothered with that, since he hadn't really done anything outstanding. Pilge warned him not to say that because it had been a long time, since the first hunter was still active, that a novice had destroyed a level 3 corrosion crack solo. Surprised by this, Sayok thought that such an achievement could only have been performed by someone extraordinary, and he believed that this hunter must be truly remarkable. Soon, they arrived at the mayor's office. Mayor Park Ji-yeon greeted him kindly and apologized for calling him in such inclement weather. He instructed Sayok to sit down while ordering Pilge to bring coffee. Once alone, Ji-yeon praised Sayok for his efforts, assuring him that he had performed an excellent service for the country. He admitted that the island had been a complicated problem, given limited resources, which made it difficult to hire an expensive guild. Sayok replied that the mayor probably felt relieved because the situation was resolved with relatively little expense. John confirmed those words and, curiously, asked if this was his first mission. Sayok confirmed with a yes. The mayor stood up excitedly, showing pride in Sayok for taking the first steps in Incheon. He began talking about how Korea is one of the safest countries in the world, leaving Sayok wondering what could have caused his sudden enthusiasm. The mayor added that Incheon is a strategic center, serving as a trade hub, and that the Free Economic Zone project has attracted numerous foreign investors. So many, he explained, that it's hard to choose just one. Additionally, he mentioned that large amounts of funds circulate in Incheon's international cities, strengthening the local economy. Afterwards, the mayor promised to provide all possible assistance to make Sayok's life as a hunter easier. During the journey, Baeon asked what Sayok was seeking in his occupation, to which he compared his role to that of someone who constantly has to clean clogged drains. Upon hearing this, Baeon assured Sayok that if he advanced, he would become famous and very popular. He also predicted that companies would start begging him to star in advertisements and that he might even be discovered by major television networks. Sayok understood that Baeon was afraid that his fame might change him, and Baeon confirmed his fears. Baeon stated that it is common for young hunting talents to be taken over by notoriety and honors, losing sight of their true mission. He considered this natural and believed that the only guarantee of safety is Korea, which he called the last refuge on Earth. Baeon told him that what he has achieved is incredible, and many people will be watching him with interest. Then, he expressed to Sayok his wish for him to remain a symbol of hope. Now that Seo holds the mayor's office, Sayok realizes that the mayor is planning everything without even passing through the corner. However, he knows that soon the mayor will discover that he is not someone easy to influence over superficial matters. Sayok's long life and countless challenges he has faced make these things insignificant to him. He then asks the mayor if there is anything he wants from him, since he does not intend to support him without something in return. Sayok appears confrontational and points out that he is almost sure the mayor's intention is to boost his approval ratings for re-election. The mayor is surprised at how well-informed Sayok is, and Sayok comments that everything can be found on anyone's phone. The mayor is left stunned by Sayok's extensive knowledge and asks if he also needs approval from the city council for his actions. It turns out the mayor is right, as Sayok needs permission to participate in missions, being still a novice. Sayok realizes that if the mayor presents this cleverly, he can say that he discovered a talent in Incheon. Then, the mayor shares that he maintains relations with several national and foreign companies. Without banging the table, he notes that the model who starred in an advertisement for a well-known coffee brand will soon see her contract expire, and her face will likely be replaced by Sayok's. Just as he plans to continue, Shu knocks over his coffee cup and confronts him, asking if he takes him for someone cheap. The mayor, confused, comments that in a world where everything changes rapidly, it seems society needs someone who can break the monotony. He lets Shu know that if he continues working as a hunter, he can easily obtain everything the mayor promises. Shu stands up to leave, while the mayor tries to persuade him, offering him secure assignments with good pay. Shu responds that those offers seem worthless to him and that he could give them to the coffee commercial model. Meanwhile, in a remote location, a strange man receives a report that his trial on the island was a failure due to the intervention of the Seahawks. The recording of his participation in the selection is being viewed, and the man shows curiosity about the black flame that surrounds him. From the beginning of the ranking, it is known that the update occurs on the first day of each month, and the entire nation eagerly awaits to find out who will be the number one hunter. Although the positions don't change much, public anticipation remains high. Attention is also focused on Cyan, who wants to know if Seo will make it onto that list. Ultimately, everything turns out to be much more different than it initially seemed. In 10th place is Shaun, while Kimchi holds the 5th position. Cho Yoriam was in 3rd place, and Jung Taizio in 2nd. Finally, in 1st place is none other than Sayok. This achievement earned him a major press conference, where he is expected to answer several questions. The spotlight is on Sayok because he is a newcomer who managed to surpass a 3rd-degree hole. The crowd bombards him with questions about how he managed to cross that kind of magical gap. After many inquiries, Sayok finally asks for one more question. The journalist asks him what his goals are, and he assures that he will do his best to achieve them. Subsequently, the association president, Moon, invites Sayok on a tour. He takes him to the place where Gansel's prison once stood, now just a large cavity in the ground where Gonzo used to be. Moon explains that what he is looking at represents the destiny of many nations. Most lost their administrative abilities after the appearance of the corrosive hole. However, South Korea managed to become a power by successfully defending its territory and advancing technologically. He acknowledges that the helicopter they are traveling in is part of that innovation, as it runs on mana and blocks external noise. Sayok asks if this is the fate of countries unable to confront the gap, and Moon confirms, stating that many capitals completely disappeared after those corrosive breaches. He suggests they get closer to the crater for a better view. As they approach, he mentions that among the 8 most dangerous corrosion holes in the world, Gonzalo's prison was one of them. He explains that it emerged 13 years ago without warning, spreading through the city and leaving everything in ruins. Although some managed to survive, most were wiped out because the area had already become a corroded zone. In just a few days, the entire city vanished without a trace. When leaving that place, Moon tells Sayok that although global power has not changed drastically, the central powers have weakened. Deep down, Sayok feels happy to be learning all this information, although he also experiences some unease at having to witness these scenes to understand it. Then, Moon mentions that Hyen from Tbek visited him a few days ago and seems to be upset because Sayok hasn't joined his guild. In fact, he inquired about Sayok's whereabouts, but Moon assures him he did not provide that information, as it is confidential. Moon explains that Tbek's guild follows an ideology based on the survival of the fittest, and if Sayok does not meet their requirements, they might try to neutralize him by force. Sayok is surprised that they could resort to such an attitude, but also worried because he doesn't feel prepared to face Hyen at that moment. Finally, Moon comments that Sayok appears to be someone who prefers to stay on the sidelines of guilds to follow his own path, and Sayok confirms that this is indeed the case. Moon hinted that he needed to raise his standards if he wanted to prevent Tbek from continuing to pursue him. He mentioned there was a way to achieve this, and one of them involved accepting missions commissioned by the president of the association. When Sayok heard this, he wasn't surprised, as he suspected there was a hidden motive behind those words. Immediately, he asked what he would get in return, convinced that they wouldn't offer tasks without their own interests. Moon explained that he simply wanted Sayok to remember the help he was giving him, and handed him an envelope with instructions to review its contents. Hope flooded him, thinking he had secured an important agreement, as he was trying to find an opportunity to enhance his reputation. The old man told him that the mission involved escorting a cargo ship from Bususan to Nanning City. He mentioned that, due to leaks of corrosion arising everywhere, the transport was extremely complicated. Sayok examined the list of objects to escort and realized they were luxury items, including a car. This surprised him, as he thought they still considered it necessary to possess such things. Moon clarified that for some people these items remained essential. He hoped Sayok would understand, but Sayok responded that he couldn't comprehend that need in a country whose infrastructure was already destroyed. Moon insisted that although many countries were collapsing due to leaks, that didn't make international politics lose its meaning. At that moment, Sayok understood that the mission was an effort to maintain relations between countries. Recognizing this, Sayok took off his seatbelt and told the old man that he wasn't interested in participating. Moon was taken aback by his response, reminding him that the Korean government took such tasks very seriously. However, Sayok remained firm in his decision and pointed out that it would be foolish to get involved in international politics at that moment. The old man was angry about his refusal and tried to remind him that he was just a rookie hunter who had recently debuted. But Sayok paid little attention. He threw the mission papers out of the helicopter and opened the door, thanking for the transport but stating that he would swim back to Seoul on his own. Without hesitation, he jumped into the water and disappeared into the depths, leaving the man utterly stunned. Later, Suk appeared at Incheon Airport and calmly emerged from the water. Looking for an employee at the port, he exchanged greetings naturally, as if such a gesture was routine. Aware that he might be threatened in the future, he decided that his top priority would be to strengthen his own protection. He planned to do this by taking on the most dangerous missions, aiming to become someone whom no power could manipulate. He checked his phone and soon found a task that seemed aligned with his goals. In a mission to rescue victims kidnapped on Tsushima Island, the estimated difficulty level is 2nd degree. Suk took a deep breath, knowing he had a lot of work ahead. On September 3rd, fishermen from Goji and Tongyong Islands went out to sea but encountered a different kind of ocean, dominated by corrupted creatures nesting on Tsushima, which violently kidnapped the fishermen as part of their hunting. According to a survivor who managed to escape with difficulty, the captured fishermen remained alive. The mission involves Suk going to Tsushima Island to free the hostages and close the corrosion fissure. The reward for this task amounts to 55 million yen, and Sayok is aware that if he manages to complete it alone, he will receive the entire sum. Moreover, if he succeeds solo, he will be recognized as a hero. Though the challenge is tempting, Suk recalls warnings about the classifications and dangers of creatures within them. It is said that a 3rd-degree corrosion fissure has destructive power comparable to a tank, while a 2nd-degree creature can reach levels of natural disaster. A 2nd-degree creature possesses terrible power, almost like a regional-scale catastrophe. In contrast, a 1st-degree creature requires the mobilization of an entire nation to be subdued. Suk knows he managed to face a 3rd-degree fissure thanks to the paradox flame, but doubts if he could stand against a 2nd-degree one without help. To be safe, he understands he might need assistance from someone useful, though he's worried about finding someone willing to accept such a civilian request. The idea that no one capable exists worries him, but suddenly he thinks maybe there is someone who can help. Soon after, Seo and his companion, who turns out to be none other than S.A., board a vessel heading toward their target. Sana asks when they will arrive, and he responds that approximately an hour remains. He advises her to regain her energy before reaching their destination, because the upcoming battle will be tougher than the previous one. While Suk reflects on this, Sa shows great interest in the metal plate he wears on his shoulder. She observes it curiously and asks about the object, since its appearance suggests it is a limited edition. The idea of how he acquired it keeps her intrigued. Suk, tired of her questions, explains that the person who gave him this gift was a scrapyard merchant he negotiated with. Sa's face shows surprise upon hearing this, as she herself received nothing useful at the time. Suk, with some irony, points out that her expectations are different because he is an aspiring prospect who managed to face a 3rd-degree fissure alone, unlike her, a rookie holding only the title of current rector of the academy. Noticing the cold expression on her face, he understands she might be annoyed by his words but decides to take the opportunity to give her some advice. To become stronger, to make herself famous, so as to avoid future insults. A few days ago, Suk contacted S.A. to inform her that he needed a partner for his next mission. Sana hesitated at first since she almost died in a level 3 portal, and Suk suggested she face a level 2 one. However, he managed to persuade her by asking if she wanted to become stronger. He assured her that he could enhance her beyond her current abilities. It turns out Sana also has a personal reason for wanting to strengthen herself, a motivation so intense she would be willing to face hell itself if it guaranteed her growth. Moments later, the ship's alarm sounded, alerting them to an unidentified object ahead. Without wasting time, they faced 5 ships. While Suk tried to decide on their next move, he was surprised to see Sana levitating in the air. She was rising smoothly, and Suk was impressed, while Sanga, watching, was even more surprised because he couldn't do it. A look of excitement washed over his face, as he finally found something Suk couldn't achieve. Sana laughed heartily, joking at Suk's expense for not being able to perform the same move. To move more easily, she had to carry Suk on her back. When they approached the enemy ships, Suk ordered Sana to handle the closest one. She asked why, and he explained that the ships in the rear seemed more dangerous. Sana accepted the task and headed toward the target, but noticed the presence of a human figure along her way. Seo, who was accompanying her, indicated that she look again, because what she thought she saw was not human. Upon boarding the ship, Suk took care of the one he wanted to clear, and sooner than expected, he found humans transformed inside it. They had lost all their humanity and showed extreme aggressiveness. Sana landed roughly on the deck, quickly drawing attention. The monsters attacked immediately, and Sayak easily eliminated the first wave. He quickly understood that they were low-level creatures. He thought that Sana should also fight more gently, but, to his surprise, she was using all her strength against the weak beings. Sayak called her out, warning her that she was using too much mana. He explained that if she continued like this, she would soon run out of energy. He told her that, at this level, she only needed a small amount of mana. Sana remembered what Sayak had told her about becoming stronger, and, following his instructions, she reduced her power. However, he insisted that it was still too much. The lives of those weak beings seemed like a tragedy to Sana, and she decided that she would never be weak again. As she defeated the enemies, she reaffirmed her determination to become even more powerful. Finally, Sana finished eliminating the monsters and asked if the battle was over. Sayak informed her that he had already cleared the other ships. She, somewhat reluctant, thanked him, recognizing that she had learned a lot from his advice. Between jokes, Sayak commented that she didn't need to thank him because many in the world wouldn't learn even with direct teaching. Sana confessed that it was the first time someone had given her advice, and Sayak was surprised by this revelation. He asked her what they were being taught at the academy, and she revealed that, because she learned everything quickly, they didn't bother teaching her the fundamentals. Shuk then provoked her, asking if she didn't think she would be stronger than him if he continued to teach her that way. With tears in her eyes, she confessed that she hadn't even managed to surpass a single master. Shuk was surprised to see her so emotional and, disdainfully, assured her that she didn't need to worry about that because it would never happen with him, as he would make sure she admired him for the rest of her life. Before deepening her training further, the sailors informed Sayak and SA that they would stay on guard in case they were needed. Before departing, Sayak mentioned that, according to a survivor, the hostages are in a sanctuary. SA told him that there are 2 sanctuaries on the island, Gajin's and Adazumi's. At first glance, Sayak considered that Gajin's might be the first stop, and Sanga noted that they could arrive there on foot in about 2 hours. Although that wasn't a problem, he was concerned about the fact that, upon return, they would need to bring 15 hostages, according to the survivor's report. Moreover, Sayak sensed an ominous mana beyond the fog and was sure that the corrosive creatures on the island would pursue them fiercely. As he pondered an escape plan, he detected a vehicle in the distance, and everything became clear immediately. He asks SA if she is a good driver, to which she responds affirmatively. Shortly after, Sayak begins to beg for her life, as SA is driving the vehicle as if it were her last day on Earth. She mocks him, suggesting that he take control if he disapproves of her driving style. Shuk tells him to forget it and jumps onto the roof of the vehicle, ready to fight the creatures that are already chasing them. SA pulls out a slingshot with arrows and shoots at the monsters, killing several of them, and as she retreats, she does the same. At this moment, Sayak warns that the monsters are already jumping toward them from the left, and shouts to SA to be careful. SA demonstrates how reckless she is as a driver, maneuvering in the most dangerous way to dispatch the beasts. With a daring move, she drives the bus on 2 wheels, moving away from the monsters. At that instant, Shak wishes he were the one at the controls. As they cross the desolate road, the enemies remain behind them, like ants following their sugar prey. Soon after, they arrive at the sanctuary, and SA mentions the monsters that are watching them, but Sayak assures her that he will handle it. Sangha drives the bus toward the sanctuary's entrance, and Sayak immediately activates the paradox flame to block the entrance, consuming any creature that approaches. Moments later, they find the hostages tied up in a corner. Sangha approaches to introduce himself, but instead of being glad to be rescued, the hostages begin behaving very strangely. Tears run down their cheeks as they insist that SA run away, and she wonders why they are warning her. Unbeknownst to her, a huge samurai monster appears behind her, ready to cut her to pieces. Fortunately, Sayak manages to block the monster's attack and instructs SA to get the survivors out of the vehicle while he faces the giant. A fierce battle then ensues between Sayak and the samurai, who seems much taller and strives to finish him off. Despite the size difference, Sayak shows no fear. Suddenly, Sa appears out of nowhere and hits the monster with the vehicle, knocking it down. With the giant on the ground, Sayak praises Sa's cunning, but she simply orders him to get into the car. Sayak stays on top of the vehicle, while the hostages remain safe inside. The journey proceeds smoothly until they notice that monsters are waiting for them on the horizon. Sayak also notices that the samurai is still alive after being run over. Facing a pile of creatures blocking their path, Sayak asks Sa to hand him her sword. The young woman is surprised, as demanding such a weapon from a swordsman is a great disrespect. Sayak asks if she prefers her honor or saving the hostages, and she has no choice but to give him the sword. He picks it up, ready to use it. To her surprise, she was wearing a strange kind of glove on her wrist. Although Sayak did not want to activate it yet, at that moment she realized she had no other choice. It turned out the glove was found on the island, inside the box delivered after defeating the core. It was not just any glove, as it could absorb magical energy from the environment. When Shuk saw it for the first time, he thought it was only used to supplement his mana, but he soon discovered it was something more powerful. The maximum energy storage capacity of the glove was 5 minutes, enough time to become stronger, just like Son. The monsters blocked their way, and Sayak held her spear and sword, preparing to launch a devastating attack. With unstoppable momentum, Sayak unleashed her power, defeating the creatures with a single blow. Sana was left in shock, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. Once the path was clear, Sayak ordered SA to proceed toward the port without turning back. However, during the journey, Seo was amazed to discover that the corrupted monsters seemed to multiply endlessly, always in their path. SA told Sayak that it would be better to get out of the vehicle and confront the enemies on foot, as they could no longer continue with the overloaded machine. But he insisted on keeping their course, and at that moment they crossed a strange barrier that miraculously kept the monsters on the other side. To the creatures' frustration, they found it difficult to break through this wall, while the car passed through without problem on their escape. SA was in shock and looked around, trying to understand why the monsters suddenly lunged after them. His eyes caught a shining symbol on the wall, leading him to wonder if that symbol was the cause of their aggression. He then remembered that before they made their move, Sayak had carved that mark, claiming it was a protective geometry. Sangha asked him what it was, and he replied that it was a method to repel evil creatures. SA's curiosity grew, and he asked where Sayak had learned this technique, but Sayak told him she would never understand it, even if he explained. The main reason was that he had acquired that knowledge in another world, at a different time and place. Now, in the present, SA asked if that method could repel any creature, and Sayak shook her head, clarifying that the barrier did not work against real monsters. Just then, a samurai passed through the barrier as if it didn't exist, demonstrating that it had no effect. The expression in his right eye began to glow, and a red laser shot toward the vehicle. SA immediately recognized this energy, calling it the Eye of the Mind. Sayak was puzzled by the term but noticed that the environment was becoming increasingly serious. However, it did not frighten him. What did alarm him was that SA was starting to tremble. She explained that the Eye of the Mind is the ability to anticipate the opponent's attacks, a technique that is difficult even for the most skilled masters. Seeing the tension in SA, Sayak told him not to be afraid, as the eye of the mind and other similar techniques are just tricks. Then, she instructed him to observe how she handled such situations, because she was going to show him something important. Her eyes began to sparkle, and suddenly the samurai started to show fear, which caused him to sway only with his weapon. Sayak calmly approached, saying that this skill is acquired through experience and essentially reacts to hostility or fear. Since the samurai could not perceive this, he stayed there, trying to appear brave. Sayak explained to Sangha that skills like the eye of the mind, the sword of the heart, and even the state of no-self are related. Without showing hostility, she moved forward and, in a single motion, knocked the warrior down, leaving him devastated. Calmly, Sayak told SA that these techniques are nothing special. She commented that the illusion called enlightenment can be terrifying because, when called by a grandiose name, some people get carried away and don't progress any further. She admitted that, on the battlefield, what matters doesn't require fancy names. Now, Sayak could speak about this confidently because she had sacrificed a lot to escape her own trap. She confessed that the samurai was truly strong, having survived a collision with a car, but her ultimate technique, which she relied on, was nothing more than the eye of the mind. After hearing all this, SA was plunged into deep reflection, questioning what she had achieved in that subjugation. Suyak soon realized that she cannot attain the mastery she desires unless she commits herself fully. With a valuable goal in mind, she humbly asked Sana to teach her seriously this time. Surprised by her request, Sana clarified that she was not seeking advice but rather a direct guidance. Sana admitted that she had seen how weak she still was and that she needs to strengthen herself quickly. She then asked what motivated her strong determination, and she confessed that she wanted to end the Shirdai Club by her own means. It turns out this club is among the 8 most dangerous corrosion fissures in the world, famous for devouring the Himalayas with a single breath. Suyak understood that her goal was much greater than usual and asked if she was doing it for revenge. Sana confirmed this and explained that she seeks to avenge her family. Then she pulled out a card and showed it to Sion, clarifying that she was not asking him to teach her for free. He examined the card and discovered that it belonged to the KY Group, which has a market valuation of 257 billion. Sana explained that this company is owned by her family, and Sion was impressed to realize that Sana comes from an influential family. He mentions that the owner of the company is his grandfather, but that she left the competition to succeed him. Suyak deduces that Sana might find herself back in the middle of that struggle if she stands out as a hunter. Then he asks her exactly what she wants, and Sana asks him to make her the best, promising rewards in the process. She trusts that he will provide her with hard-to-obtain ingredients, such as elixirs not distributed through regular channels. Since Sion also seeks to strengthen herself, Sana assures him that with such elixirs she will be able to do so. Sion realizes that Sana won't even believe him if he tells her she has already reached the level she was aiming for before. The true reason she is trying so hard is to return to Earth just as it was in the past. Then Suyak shakes Sana's hand, confirming they have reached an agreement. He hands her a list of his demands and proposes that they first take the hostages to the hospital. After leaving the injured, Sangha consults with the doctor about how long they will need to recover. Since there are 7 patients with nutritional deficiencies, the doctor responds that it may take at least a week before they can speak. He assures them that they will be the first to know when the hostages wake up, so it's crucial to give them rest. Suyak, agreeing with the doctor, calls Sana to follow him, as they begin their training immediately. Once in a suitable place to prepare, Suyak decides to ask Sana a question before starting. He asks if she thinks she could dodge his spear if he swings it with full force. Nervously, she replies that it would be difficult, as there is a significant difference in their skills. Without warning, Suyak indicates that she can actually dodge his attack if she uses her senses to the fullest. He explains she must see with her eyes, hear with her ears, perceive odors, and feel with her skin. Only after activating all these senses should she fight within her conscious awareness, not unconsciously. After these instructions, Suyak decides to test her immediately. Before Sana can understand what's happening, Seo disappears, and she is left confused, trying to locate him. Within seconds, Seo appears behind her, pointing his spear at her neck and telling her she was wrong for being too slow. He clarifies that senses must take precedence over thoughts and that in combat there's no time to think. You have to accept what the senses indicate and act quickly. He warns her that senses not yet fully mastered will only deceive her in battle. After repeating his advice, Seo suggests continuing with practice in the practical part. Meanwhile, a security guard watches the scene, stunned by the destruction in the training area. When his friend joins the observation, they are both left wide-eyed. The arena, which serves as a training ground, has been destroyed by the intensity of the confrontation, where both fight with uncontrollable fury. Sayak makes sure to hinder their progress so that San can strengthen himself as quickly as possible. During the fight, Seo jumps into the air, preparing for a powerful blow that Sanga admits she couldn't dodge. Just as the attack is about to land, the guards call Suk, informing him that one of the survivors has just woken up. He then decides to end that first training session, as it seems San has started to learn how to block more effectively. She observes in horror, unable to believe that everything that has happened so far was only the first round. Upon entering the clinic, Suk asks the survivor if he is okay, and he affirms that he is. He then reveals that a truck arrived at the place where they were held and that strange people got out of it. Sa asks if they were other hostages, but he responds that they are not. They were too calm to be hostages. Moreover, he notes that the creatures did not show any aggression and that it seemed as if they were even helping. He mentions that a few hostages were taken and transported in the truck. Hearing this, Suk finally understands what he has been trying to figure out. He had wondered why there were only 7 hostages in that place when it had taken him and Sanga so much effort to get in. Then, he asks the survivor to tell him about the man who escaped, and he explains that it wasn't a real escape, but that the villains had deliberately let them go. This revelation profoundly shocks Sanga. After the interview, Suk and Sanga clearly understand what kind of enemies they are dealing with. Suk confesses that he has been wondering how a civilized person could escape so easily when it had been so difficult for them to gain entry. Then, Sa questions Suk if he thinks the mission itself was a trap from the beginning. Suddenly, Sayak intervenes coldly, asking, "How dare the villains play dirty like that?" Sa is completely stunned, not understanding the reason for Seo's anger, unsure if it's because of underestimating the enemy or because they used human lives to lure them. The two then ask the survivor if he can provide any other information, and he reveals that around the waist of the person who left in the truck, there was a cat disguised as a pet. Later, Sa manages to understand his clue. When Sayak asks how he knew, she reminds him that her mobile phone is not just for decoration. Defending Sayak, he explains that for people like him, internet costs under those circumstances are usually prohibitive, referring to the early 21st century. Soon after, they come across the man they had been searching for, a character with numerous piercings on his face. Sayak chooses to mock him by asking if he ever used a sewing machine to fix that ugly face of his. However, inwardly, he senses that he is not just an ordinary character, and the man acts with arrogance, inviting them to the main scene. Then, he introduces himself as Kim Jong and warns them that he will try to capture them alive. Sayak wonders what that means and decides to demonstrate it. He grabs a somewhat battered individual and throws him into the hole behind him. Sanga, horrified, thinks that those thrown into that abyss will not be able to come out until it is destroyed. But contrary to all expectations, the man thrown into the hole manages to come out again, though transformed. Gion is not particularly pleased with this transformation, as the man appears much weaker. With a single punch, Gion sends him flying away, causing him to disappear into the distance. Terrified by the scene, Sa wonders if the villains plan to turn her into a creature of the abyss as well. Gion boasts that sacrificing ordinary people has not yielded optimal results, and at that moment, both understand that the enemies were not collecting money through kidnappings, but conducting experiments on those victims. Kim Jong clarifies that they don't really care if they survive, but for the greater good and their boss, he will tell the truth only once. He claims that he and his people are descendants of Dan Gun, whose mission is to maintain and enhance South Korea's influence, preventing anyone from challenging their power. After his explanation, he steps on the ground, creating a gigantic wave that lifts cars into the air. Then, he tries to throw one of them at them, but Sa quickly intervenes and slices it in half. Sayok prepares to face the man, reminding him that his country is already a superpower. However, the opponent disagrees, stating that that is not enough yet. Gion rushes towards them, assuring that they will elevate the nation to levels where no one will dare to look down on them, with the goal of making it an absolute power. With vigorous leaps into the air, he attempts a kick to knock down Seo, who faces him with determination. In the midst of the fight, recalling the times both had to pay tributes and humiliations, he expresses his desire to return each of those affronts. As they exchange blows, Seo notices that his opponent has a black belt in Taekwondo and moves with astonishing speed, despite not being armed. Suddenly, Seo receives a severe kick to the chest that sends him flying several meters away. In his final attack, it becomes clear that his speed is remarkable, but his strength, though significant, remains controlled. Seo quickly realizes that his opponent's origin lies in a certain perspective. If they manage to eliminate the corrosion cracks threatening to destabilize their country, it would be very difficult for Korea to maintain its current position. As Seo delves deeper into the situation, he concludes that that group has no intention of saving the world, and his perception aligns with that idea. Suk reminds him that many people are on the verge of death, so they should be their priority, but Gion insults them, claiming they understand nothing. He states that they have already found a way to control the cracks, and upon hearing this, Suk realizes that this development could drastically change things. The ability to manipulate the cracks would allow them to prevent current suffering and shift the balance of power. Then, Suk requests some time to consider collaborating, asking how much real effort they can make to control the crack, and if their response is satisfactory, he is willing to hand over SA. Hearing this, SA is stunned, but Gion intervenes, declaring that they have only managed to control the crack to some extent. Suk quickly stops him, clarifying that by to some extent, he means there isn't full control yet. He reproaches Gion for speaking arrogantly, pointing out that, in reality, he's nothing more than an inefficient fool. He labels him a thug who has no idea what he's doing, which enrages Gion, who responds by launching a powerful kick at them. Suk barely dodges the attack, and the ground where Gion lands shatters into pieces. At that moment, Suk realizes that perhaps he accidentally provoked the enemy, because he was only trying to buy time to recharge some mana, as the bar on his glove has already fallen to a critical level. Suk deduces that his best option at this point is to engage Gion in a war of attrition, enduring his blows and delaying his advance. Gion accelerates toward him, but SA appears to stop him. Gion mocks her, saying she probably stayed in the rear out of fear. Then, an electric aura begins to emerge from her, and Gion challenges her, claiming that at least she has some courage and value. Suk orders SA to fall back, assuring her that she can't face the enemy. However, SA replies that she has noticed the remaining charge in Suk's gloves and needs that time to act. She asks how much more she needs, and he responds that 5 minutes is enough. Without wasting time, SA pulls out a bottle with an elixir and tells Suk to leave the fight in her hands. A gentle light begins to emanate from the elixir, making SA feel increasing tension in her body, while Suk worries about the possibility of overloading her. However, SA reassures his friend, telling him that elixirs are only used in emergencies, and right now this is precisely her situation. Urgently, Suk begs her to hold on for 5 more minutes, promising to end the fight within that time. As SA prepares to risk her life, she tells Suk to take advantage of that moment and make it count. At that moment, a fierce battle erupts between the two, forcing Sana to exert all her strength in the fight. As the intensity increases, she manages to land a vertical strike on John's image, hoping to have defeated him. But at that moment, Gion appears from behind and delivers such a powerful kick that Sana is sent flying through the air, blood streaming from her mouth. Before touching the ground, Sayok finishes charging his energy and swiftly reaches her, catching her in his arms. In a cold, calm voice, he asks John if he is finally willing to die. Surprised, Gion perceives an increase in the opponent's energy and wonders how he managed to do that in such a short time. as it would be impossible to gather so much energy in that span. Confused, Gion begins to suspect that Sayok has been hiding his true strength all along. Sayok questions Gion why he acts so bewildered, asserting that he only follows a single principle, similar to the piercings he wears. Gion's surprise grows as he realizes that Sayok has uncovered his trick, to which Sayok replies that only a fool wouldn't have seen it. He points out that Gion is leaking energy everywhere, trying to use a power he can't control, although due to his recklessness, he managed to reactivate his paradox flame. Gion believes that Sayok is only talking nonsense, as there's no way to absorb wasted energy. But before he can react, Sayok appears behind him and says he doesn't need to understand because he's about to die. Then, Sayok unleashes a combo of 16 strikes, piercing him with his sword in multiple directions and disturbing his paradox flame. Gion, unable to breathe or move his muscles, collapses, stunned by the destruction he has suffered. Although he tries to stand, his strength is exhausted as not a trace of his resistance remains. Realizing he is about to die, he begs his captain to save him. Suddenly, a projectile approaches from above, and Sayok detects the threat just before being hit. He quickly dodges, wielding his spear to block the attack. The source of the shot seems to be Gion's captain, who is on the rooftop, wearing a mask and a hood covering his face. This captain congratulates him for being able to stop the assault, saying that he had previously tried to break his wrist. Curious, Sayok wonders who this man is and inwardly begins to suspect that he might be Gion's captain. Although reluctant to admit it, he feels that this figure is at least twice as strong as Sion. But, upon observing him more carefully, he emphasizes that he might be 4 times more powerful. The captain then challenges him, asking if he does not fear death. Sayok calmly replies that he does not fear death because he knows that if the captain wanted to end his life, he would have already done so. However, the captain intentionally withholds it, and Sayok asks if what interests him is the black flame he uses. When displaying these dark flames, the ones burning John, they become even more intense, causing him unbearable pain. The young man pleads for help, and the captain orders him to extinguish those flames, warning that he will not give the same instruction again. Sayok realizes that Gion's mana has already run out, but the captain is sustaining him with his own magic to keep him alive. Additionally, he understands that if the captain's arrow had been aimed at his head instead of his wrist, he would have died instantly. However, the captain deliberately avoided doing that. Faced with no other options, Sayok must free Gion from the flame's chains. But just as Gion tries to fall, the captain swiftly lunges to catch him, further terrifying Sayok as he witnesses the enemy's incredible speed. The captain rebukes him, saying that he has just ruined Gon's life, who will have to live in a wheelchair for the rest of his days. Then, he draws his bow and states that although he would like to capture him alive, it's not necessary for him to be in perfect condition. He advises Sayok to proceed with his plan, as he does not intend to make him his puppet. Noticing Sayok's stubbornness, the captain decides to retreat, yet he remains interested in understanding the black flames that the young man uses. Before disappearing, he leaves a warning that someday he too will be under his control. After he leaves, Sayok reflects on the situation and realizes he's gotten involved with someone of quite a difficult character. Then, Sa approaches and comments that it seems the villains are after his unique ability. Sayok confirms this suspicion but admits he doesn't know exactly why they want his power. Sa also asks why the antagonist didn't take her hostage, and Sayok explains that they might be aware of her past. However, Sangha doesn't believe that the terrorists would consider something like that. Sayok asks him to think carefully, as the enemies might even have support from the Korean government. He requests that this potential information be kept secret, since Sa admits she's not good at lying. Then, Sayok suggests leaving things for later and focusing first on the crack they face. Next, he tells her to stay back because he will go in alone. He encourages her to rest and recover until he returns, and without further ado, he ventures into the crack. Upon reaching the second level of the blurry space, Sayok finds a fortress of undead in the center of the chaos. He walks toward the fortress and perceives a highly dangerous energy emanating from there. Without anyone telling him, He intuits that the core of the corruption is behind the door. He convinces himself he must act very carefully because if he drops his guard, he could die. When he opens the door, he perceives a large pot from a distance and begins to wonder if this object might be the core of all the evil they are facing. Sayok feels surprised because reality sharply differs from his initial expectations. Suddenly, a hand appears from behind and grabs his leg tightly. The man looks terrifying and clearly wounded. He pleads with Sayok to save him, desperate from having lost both legs. At that moment, a tentacle emerges from the pot and throws the poor man inside. Shortly after, the man reemerges as an undead. His expression changed and lifeless. Sayok quickly realizes that the pot was the source generating these supernatural creatures. A revelation that fills him with such intense fury that it almost makes him nauseous. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoes in the room, referring to Sayok as another sacrifice amidst the horror, though it concedes that he is different from the others. After these words, a figure appears in the background of the vision, revealing itself as a core, which turns out to be a swordsman. The core draws his sword and orders Sayok to do the same, as he needs to temper the blade with his own blood. The presence of the swordsman frightens Shook, who feels his fear intensify under the overwhelming pressure emanating from the figure, an unmistakable sign of his tremendous strength. The captain's ability to dominate this formidable warrior, whom he regards with respect and fear, leads him to wonder if someone even more powerful might exist. As Sayok reflects, the swordsman swiftly charges at him, nearly decapitating him in an instant, but Sayok narrowly manages to dodge. This action confirms that his opponent is much stronger than he had imagined. Nevertheless, the young man decides to risk everything from the start, attacking with all his might before the enemy can detect his weakness. He delivers a powerful strike toward the core, aiming to end the battle quickly. To his surprise, the core manages to block his attack with a skill that leaves him breathless, using only his sword. The situation becomes even more unsettling because Sayok notices he didn't even see how the enemy deflected his blow. Before Sayok can react to what is happening, the core strikes him swiftly and brutally with his sword, slicing through his body at the waist. Fear and confusion overwhelm Sayok as he realizes that his opponent is much faster and more aggressive than he had thought. However, the swordsman, in a show of respect, acknowledges that Sayok managed to prevent him from hitting vital points. Moving with dangerous steps, he decides to test Sayok with an even more perilous challenge. He executes quick, powerful cuts that cause the young man to fall to his knees, exhausted and severely wounded. Realizing the severity of his situation, Sayok understands that he has no choice but to turn to the flame of paradox, a powerful source of energy. But a problem arises. The enemy is not alive in the conventional sense, so the flame of paradox has no effect as an offensive weapon. For a moment, he ponders what he should do until he manages to stand up with the help of the flame. The swordsman, surprised by his resilience, questions what he must do to bring him down. But before he can act, Sayok receives several more cuts. The situation worsens. Every muscle in his body is torn, and, close to losing consciousness, Sayok clings to the hope that he can still move the muscles above his shoulders. With determination, he decides to use the flame of paradox to accelerate his recovery and heal his wounds quickly. The strength he gains allows him to rise again, astonishing the core, who cannot understand how Sayok still has the necessary strength to stand. It's clear that the young man has not yet shown all his potential, and becoming aware of this drives him to keep fighting, even without fully understanding how he manages to do so. The battle continues, and increasingly, the struggle for survival becomes more intense and dangerous. Acting swiftly, Sayok manages to position himself behind the enemy, convinced that he finally has an opportunity. When he makes his move, to his surprise, the opponent disappears right in front of him and reappears behind him, as if it were a fleeting thought. The enemy mocks Sayok, telling him he is too slow, and strikes him quickly, but instead of finishing him off, decides not to kill him. Seizing this moment, Sayok quickly retreats, leaving the enemy wanting to joke about his apparent mistake. However, Sayok yells at him, saying not to play with him, that he could have killed him if he wanted to, and asks whether he is playing with him out of pity. The enemy admits that he could have ended Sayaka in that very moment but insists that he has changed now, that he no longer even remembers his own name, and that most of his memories have been lost over time. He confesses that gaps in his technique, caused by forgetfulness, have been fatal. He explains that after his defeat, they chained him, and that his case is actually the opposite of Sayaka's. His body remains intact, but his experiences and memories are almost forgotten. It is then that Sayaka understands that the chains surrounding the enemy's neck are precisely the ones the captain and Gion mentioned earlier. The opponent begins to speak, lamenting how much he has lost, from his name to the reason he started to become a swordsman. All that remains now is deep resentment, tinged with sadness. At that moment, the warrior undergoes a sudden transformation, and Sayaka notices that his resentment has grown even more, although, paradoxically, he has lost much of his technique and experience in the process. Sayaka believes that if the enemy fails to finish him off with a single blow, he still has a minimal chance to win. He then decides to unleash all his strength, convinced that he must do so to defeat the swordsman. The enemy is surprised to see that all of Sayaka's wounds have healed, now covered by black flames engulfing his body. As Sayaka leans his hand on the ground, the swordsman comments on his astonishment upon discovering that Sayaka possesses a unique ability. However, he notices that these black flames seem to be consuming something more, and Sayaka praises him for his keen intuition. He explains that these black flames burn concepts, and although they appear to have infinite destructive power, in reality, the greater the concept one tries to burn, the more mana it requires. Because the most powerful applications are more difficult to control, Sayaka knows he must be careful not to be dragged down by a chain reaction. The opponent recalls that, in the past, he wouldn't need to worry about control, as he used the flames with less risk. But now, the situation is different. Without hesitation, Sayaka tells him that he will consume all of the area's resistance. When the swordsman looks confused, Sayaka keeps his reasons to himself and swiftly lunges with his spear in a rapid charge. He manages to push the enemy backward, and Sayaka realizes he can take advantage of this situation, having detected that the swordsman has a limit. Seeing how severe the fight was becoming, the warrior suggests that they continue the confrontation outside the structure. At that moment, a brutal fight erupts, with both attacking relentlessly and destroying everything in their path. Buildings collapse, and poles break as they try to hit each other. Soon, Sayaka is surrounded, and his spear is snapped in half. The enemy delivers an extremely powerful slash, seemingly aimed at ending Sayaka, but his attack misses its target. Sayaka quickly dashes toward the enemy, managing to pierce through a rock at dizzying speed, shouting furiously before striking with his weapon. This action unleashes a series of repeated blows that force the swordsman to retreat, battered and injured. Realizing the strength of Shuk's attack, the swordsman asks who he is, confused. While still trying to recover from the last blow, Sayaka appears from above, cutting him with perfect lasers that split his body into pieces. The swordsman screams in pain, losing much of his vital energy, but he does not stop and attacks again. Both engage in a knife fight, and although both are harmed, Sayaka's wound is deeper, diagonally slicing the opponent. Not wanting to give up, both of them screamed in pain as they fought, recalling their confrontation in another world. On that occasion, someone had asked what he would do if he encountered an enemy of equal strength. Sayaka replied that one of them wouldn't leave alive. Now, in the crack, his most powerful attack dealt a devastating blow to the swordsman, though it cost him everything he had. However, in the end, Sayaka managed to smile, convinced that he was the stronger. When the swordsman disappeared, the crack rewarded him, just as it had after defeating the second-grade corps. Sayaka was glad that rewards always appeared, just like in his other world. He checked the box and found a lance tip, which left him confused about how to use it. Without wasting time, he threw it far away and then called it back. Soon, he realized he could extend it using mana. He remembered that rewards were granted based on the number of people entering the crack and thought how it would have been better if Sangha had followed him from a safe place to obtain a reward. Then, he noticed that the enemy's sword did not disappear and decided to seize it. Shortly after, Sayok returned to the surface and found S.A. sleeping. He threw her the sword to wake her up, surprised by her appearance, as she looked different from any weapon he had seen before. Sayok explained that he had found it on his way and assured her it was a good blade, as whoever wielded it was no ordinary opponent. S.A. examined it and agreed, recognizing that the sword was truly magnificent. She asked where he had obtained it, but Sayok, exhausted, asked her not to worry about it. He only wanted to know if she had rested enough while he was away. Before he could say more, Sayok also lost consciousness. S.A. was surprised, but that simply confirmed that Sayok was still a human being. The danger of a second-grade crack made everyone go on alert upon learning that he had overcome it alone. The news spread quickly, and everyone was amazed, since even the most capable hunters usually find it difficult to face such a challenge without help. His face appeared everywhere, turning him into the celebrity of the moment. Later, Sayok wakes up in a hospital room and notices he cannot leave because a crowd is waiting outside. Soon after, a woman with glasses enters the room and introduces herself as Ja Soo-jang, claiming to be part of the Embargo Tower Secretariat. Sayok asks her to come in, grateful for covering his hospital expenses, although he confesses he had not heard of such an organization before. Ja Soo-jang responds that it is not a publicly known entity, as its main expertise lies in information technology. He assures her that he can come to her if he encounters any issues, although Sayok tells him that for now she has no problems. However, she expresses curiosity about something else. She asks whether the organization expects anything in return for their help, considering that the hospital's cost was not small, and makes it clear that the organization probably wants something from him. Without wasting time, Sayok directly inquires what they want from him. Before he responds, Soo-jang hands her a cake to eat. Once they both feel more at ease, he speaks to her about a shield generator. He explains that it is a device capable of creating a protective barrier against corrosive creatures. The organization is interested in having CO help transport this very important piece of equipment. Although it is still a prototype manufactured in the United States, Soo-jang assures her that if it works and is produced on a large scale, it will greatly benefit areas inaccessible to hunters. Essentially, it is a crucial mission that could change the fate of humanity. At that moment, Sayok understands that it is a task of great magnitude, and Soo-jang confirms that they are assessing whether other hunters are willing to collaborate. She then asks about possible allies, and Soo-jang mentions that Janabe has already agreed to participate. Hearing this, Sayok realizes that everything is larger than she had imagined. The conversation continues, revealing that the transportation of the generator will be by train. When it departs from Vladivostok and arrives in the Netherlands, it will be transferred by helicopter to the United Kingdom for testing. Sayok asks why such effort is being made to go to the UK, and she explains that in Naples, Italy, there is one of the Great Rifts, Tarrant, whose influence extends from Europe to North Africa. The only relatively safe zone in the region would be the UK, partly protected by the sea. She also warns that Europe is in total chaos, with governments collapsing and unable to control the situation. It turns out that hunter companies have taken control of several regions, acting as warlords. Therefore, it seems they will also be responsible for transporting aid supplies at the request of international organizations. This makes Sayok realize that many individuals will try to attack the train. Soo-jang then asks if he has ever traveled abroad, but he replies that he has not. He confesses that this will be his first mission outside the country, and she warns him that he will probably face dangerous situations there. Confusion arises in Soo-kei when he notices she uses a plural term, and she explains that she will also be going on the mission. Then, Suk expresses his wish for S.A. to accompany them, assuring her that he is a reliable friend. Without hesitation, Sayok agrees to the request, happy because this way she will expand her influence. Later, he heads to the rooftop where a helicopter awaits him, surprised to learn that it was the association president who arranged for his presence. The president tells him that having overcome a second-degree fracture has changed his perspective, and assures him that the organization will do everything possible to support his actions. Deep down, Sayok feels proud of having proven his strength through his abilities, which has made things much easier. At the same time, he wonders if the president is aware of Gion and his people, and whether he would want life on Earth to continue or come to an end. As he boards the helicopter, he finds Cyan waiting for him, who compliments him by saying that his stories have spread everywhere, and that it would be easier to find someone who doesn't know him than someone who does. Then, he asks where they are headed, and she reveals that they are going to a military base. Sayok inquires about the reason, and she explains that the South Korean army also plans to participate in the mission. He understands that all countries would want to collaborate, as this would reduce dependence on hunters for national defense. However, he believes that perhaps South Korea might not be keen on that idea. He then asks Seuen if she knows about Dangan's descendants, to which she confirms they are a terrorist group. She mentions having confronted them during the mission on Suema Island, and that these descendants, all Koreans, appear in various places, disrupting operations whenever hunters try to close a fracture. Seo shares his opinion on the matter, and as always, Son gives him a sweet, confusing Sayok. At that moment, Son asks if he has left Korea before, and he's surprised, noticing that Son repeats a question similar to one Su Jang had asked. Sayok casually replies that it's his first time, and Cyan assures him that the mission will open his eyes to many things.